Okay, so we're going to get to know our five panelists. So it's about medical, paramedical, educational and schooling care and support practices around Europe and across the Atlantic. So it's a little bit of a cross-section. And the golden rule, ladies, is to tell us about your own lives, your day-to-day lives. But the idea is to know what's happening in your country. So maybe not just talk about your own personal cases, but also tell us what's going on in your country, what you know about other families as well in similar conditions. So are we ready to start this round table? Yep, we have an artist as well. So we can hear the translation. Sorry, we can hear you in our headsets, but we can't hear you in the conference room. So can you hear? So speaker is speaking in a mic. He's a man. I don't know if you can hear that male voice, Effie.
No, I can't hear a male voice. Oh, I can hear now.
Effie.
Yes, I can hear.
Ouais, donc elle ne peut pas entendre les lancements, ce qui va être fâcheux. Effie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
And your mic, can you? Okay, nice. Are you able to speak with your mic? I think your mic is up, no?
No, this is my mic here. This is my mic.
Est-ce que vous pouvez allumer votre micro? C'est bon?
Could you switch your mic on? Great.
I have switched it on, yes.
Donc ça veut dire qu'il faut que j'ai une oreillette pour entendre ces réponses. D'accord? On est entre nous, hein, voilà. C'est pour ça que les tests, on n'a jamais fait assez de tests, pardon, excusez-moi.
Sorry, we're just still organizing ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to ask the first question and we'll go around the table, ladies. Let's take a look at a few photographs and you will tell us what's in each of those photographs. It's a member of your families. You will introduce them. The child in question, your child, and tell us when you were diagnosed, when they were diagnosed, present your family and, you know, when it was diagnosed. So maybe we can start in Denmark with you, Cornelia Klugman. You are a mother of Emmeline, and she is 5, and I think we have a photo of her.
Thank you for the invitation, Camille, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I don't think there's my photo yet, but can I anyway start? So this is me. I'm from Germany. My husband, Richard, who's American, and so we're quite an international family because the children were born in Belgium, and where we used to live in Brussels, and now we live in Denmark. We've lived there almost 2 years now in Copenhagen. And so this is our older son, Evan. He's nearly 8 years old. He's typically developing. And we have our little Uda, who is here at the moment being very well cared for by the helpers. She is 5 years old. When Uda was 6 months old, we couldn't detect any successful attempts at sitting up, so we were getting a little worried, took her to a doctor, and the pediatrician didn't know either what was wrong with her, but took her to a robot therapy, physiotherapy, and that's been very good. She's had this for years, and the therapist helped her to sit up, and also was practicing a lot at home to crawl and finally to walk, and now she's almost, she's running sometimes. And she was diagnosed, had a genetic diagnosis at 1.5 years.
On va aller du côté de l'Espagne avec notre plus française.
Let's move on to Spain now with our most French of Spanish mums. She is Justine, mother of Maya. You're vice chairman of the association DDX3X. We'll talk about that just after. But if we could start with hearing about Maya and her family. Thank you. So I am French. We live in Spain. The photo, which is about to come up, shows my daughter Maya. She is 9. She was diagnosed when she was 4. Born in Spain. I was pregnant whilst in Spain, and in my case, the pregnancy was very tricky. There were some signs, all of the tests were coming back normal, but at week 34, I think, or the 32nd week, there was a brain malformation. So obviously, at that stage, you couldn't do anything about it. But there were various signs that were pointing in that direction. So here's Maya, she's 9. Her brother Helio to the left, who's 4, and the small, who's 2 years old. Okay, the photo's a little bit older. And Alvaro, the dad. So we had to wait for 4 years for the diagnosis. And I think by that time, we didn't believe we were going to ever get a diagnosis. But, you know, whatever. What we wanted was to know whether we could have more children. That was the main thing. That was the most important thing for us, actually. On top of course, helping Maya the best we could. But without that diagnosis, we did get to therapies and doctors that were very helpful. So the label helps for some things, but for others doesn't really make a difference. And I think maybe that's how we all feel. And the diagnosis didn't change the situation very much, but we got to see we just wanted to know whether we could have more children. And we wanted to meet other families as well. For us, it was really important to be able to talk to other families, share our experience of the condition with these other families. Okay, let's go to England now and meet Sadie's mom, Effie. Good morning, Effie.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, perfectly.
Yes,
So
thank you.
A quick presentation of your daughter.
Yes, so that's myself and my daughter Sadie. She is now 19 years old, and she was, we first got the diagnosis when she was 13 years old in February 2018. However, I noticed that the letter from the laboratory was dated much earlier than that, in July 2017, and I've never yet found out why there was such a delay before I found out from when the geneticist was told. So I suppose, similar to your last speaker, it didn't make a huge difference to how her life was at that point, but it made a big difference to me because I was able to meet lots of other people who have DDX3X. I have met them in person. Just 2 days ago, I was spending time in New York with one of our American friends, with her daughter with DDX3X. So it's made a big difference to me to find out about other people with the same condition.
Denmark, l'Espagne.
Okay, so thank you. We've done Denmark, Spain, the UK, and now France with Camille. You are Nell's mom. Can you just quickly introduce yourself? Yes, Nell is our eldest daughter. We have 4 beautiful daughters. Nell is 12, and the DDX3X diagnosis happened when she was 6.5. Of course, we didn't wait for 6.5 years to realize that she had problems with all of her development. And during the first years, we had physio, we had speech therapy, we had various motor, occupational therapy as well. And she had a brain scan when she was 17 months. I was pregnant with our second daughter, Ines, and that identified cerebral or brain malformation. and the brain scan really was done to make sure that my second pregnancy or second child would be all right. So this is our family this summer. There's Nell in the middle, Ines 10, Avril 10, and Ellie 5. Thank you. So maybe you know Emily in Paris, but we have Chelsey in Paris, who is the manager of DDX3X together with Camille. You've come to us from the US. Thank you very much for being here this morning. So let's just go back a moment, if I may. How many people are diagnosed in the US? Do you have any figures? And maybe
were you able to put the slide up?
No
worries if not. It's okay. Okay, that's okay. So right now we have a little over 1,100 known cases in the world. Hello. Is that better? Right now we have a little over. Sorry. Right now we have a little over 1,100 known cases in the world. Of those, 415 are in the United States. 665 are in the rest of the world. And of those 665, 433 of those are in Europe, 86 right here in France. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
86 en France, Camille, mais il y a quelques années, c'était
86 in France, Camille, but a few years ago it was 40. Yes, when Nell was diagnosed in 2017, there were approximately 40 cases, known cases in France. And I was talking earlier to Céline Ringimbert, who said that when their daughter was diagnosed, she's called Eve-Marie, there were 2 or 3 cases in France at the time. Because the syndrome was recently discovered, now it's something that people look for. They screen for it. So the more we screen, the more we find cases. But the doctors said that the DDX3X syndrome is largely underdiagnosed. Well, there is an example in the Lille University Hospital where Nell is actually taken care of. There was a doctor there who said he did not necessarily know whether there were many more cases. Yes, that's something we discuss among families. The information may be reported through different channels. For instance, the census of children or families carrying the syndrome may go through the families, through the associations, through the doctors themselves. But communication and exchange of information is not necessarily really well organized. It's not this. There isn't a very good flow of information. That's why we encourage you to fill in the questionnaire online on the platform and talk to the doctors, and doctors should talk to each other, and families also should talk to each other and help each other identify cases. They should really try to contact other families, and that's the whole point of the Extraordinaire Association. So if I understand well, your children were diagnosed at different ages. Is there a difference when the diagnosis happens at an earlier age or later? I would like to start by asking Effie the question. Is there a difference when the child is diagnosed at an early age or a later age, as is the case with this particular child?
So that's an interesting question. I think in terms of my personal experience, it did not, the late diagnosis meant that we couldn't get much early intervention. But even if we'd had that diagnosis at the time when she was born, there was so little known about DDX3X that it might not have made much difference. But I think where it will make a difference is in the future, because as we find out more about DDX3X, we can look for particular therapies that will be of help. So, for example, I have a friend with a daughter with Rett syndrome, which is another condition that is an X chromosome condition, but much more known about because it was discovered earlier. And she has from birth been monitored by many specialists to see if she will develop certain conditions that she hasn't developed yet. For example, a spinal surgeon to see if she will get problems with her spine. Whereas my daughter, who is the same age, was never monitored by a spinal surgeon until she developed issues with her spine, where she has three conditions, scoliosis, kyphosis, and lordosis now, that developed very quickly during puberty to quite a severe degree. When we realized she had these conditions, we were then recommended to have, for example, physiotherapy on horseback. But when I went to get physiotherapy on horseback, we were not able to access it because the physiotherapist said her scoliosis is now too far developed to safely use that therapy. So I think that for the future, early diagnosis is going to be key to be able to monitor and provide support as soon as, or before even, conditions are noticed within the child. So yes, I think early diagnosis in the future is going to be really, really useful.
Un diagnostic précoce vous semble très utile à l'avenir. C'est votre avis aussi, Justine? Vous avez
early diagnosis will be useful for the future. Justine, do you share that opinion? Would you like to add something? Absolutely. Depending on what age a child is diagnosed, makes a lot of difference. The earlier, the better, because we can anticipate on certain symptoms, as Dr. Ruhe was saying. Being aware that your child suffers from that syndrome means that you can anticipate on future symptoms. Maya, who's 9 years old, has recently been diagnosed T1, which means that she has autism spectrum disorders. And she also has a deficit attention hyperactivity disorder at the age of 9. And as parents, that's something that we monitored. Obviously, we were looking for the symptoms, and the doctor said, no, don't worry, autism spectrum disorders, no, she's got all good eye contact, so, no risk. And yet, at the age of 9, we finally diagnosed that she suffered from autism spectrum disorders. So knowing beforehand, earlier, when the child is diagnosed at an early age, will help you anticipate for future symptoms. On the other hand, I know that the experience may change from one person to another, regardless of the age at which the diagnosis is made. For some people, it means that you can actually come to terms with the disease, you have a name, you know what your child suffers from. But for other people, it also opens up the door for many different questions. We know it's called the DDX3X syndrome. Okay, now I know what the disease is, and so what? You start looking up on the internet, Googling the disease, you don't find anything or not much, and that's the reason why we're here today. And that's all the reason why there are associations around so that you can talk to other people who suffer from the faced with the same challenge, and you can support each other. Absolutely. I mean, Maya was diagnosed when she was 4 years old in Spain, and there were 4 cases. It was 2018. And so we met with the other 3 families, and we decided together with other mothers after a couple of years to create the DDX3X Spanish Association, because in Spain there was nothing. There was nothing at the time. So we decided to create an association. So, well, for many reasons. First of all, to push for more research. There was nothing in Spain. There was no research whatsoever. So we wanted to get things rolling and start the first trial study, thanks to the zebrafish that we will talk about this afternoon. And we wanted to encourage research on the national level, but also internationally. We tried to contact all the professionals who are familiar with the syndrome and work on this syndrome, both in Europe and in the US and Australia as well, and other countries where research has been conducted. And we wanted to provide support for the other families, because that's one of our missions. We really want to provide support to families when their child has recently been diagnosed, help them cope with the problem for administrative matters, because obviously, depending on the country, there are programs, but there are also administrative issues. And so we try to provide support to the families. So we understand, ladies and gentlemen, that there was a before the diagnosis and after the diagnosis time. Cornelia, could you tell us what difference it made in your child's life, your family's life as well, before the diagnosis and after the diagnosis?
Some of the therapists or the doctors told us that it wouldn't change very much, that the therapies mainly addressed the symptoms of the disability. For example, that there's very little speech, so we do what we can to help her speak. But in this context, I'd love it if Angela's research and other research on this was more well known, because, for example, you told us, we participated in your study, and you told us that a lot of the girls have a fracture of speech. And if this was also more well known in the commune who pays for the therapies in our place in Denmark, then this could automatically be said, okay, this is a very severe speech impediment and she needs intensive speech therapy. And with this, we really don't have enough. We have speech therapy 1 hour a week paid for by the commune. I'm very lucky to have a generous employer who helps us, who helps our little daughter, and pays for more therapy. So we pay as private speech therapist twice a week on top of that, and our employer will pay, my employer will pay me back with a different technique to help Uda at least develop some speech. There is some speech, but very little. Other therapies also, where we started the therapy Bobat kinesiotherapy before a diagnosis was given. And when it was given, it was confirmed that this was the right therapy. Also, the ergotherapy started a little later. It's also totally standard, I think, for this diagnosis. Of course, it was a very hard blow to get the diagnosis. We were at faire le deuil. We had to also grieve. The future our daughter is probably not going to have, but still, it helps you to get to deal with it, to know how to expect some things. And also in Belgium, where we lived before, and I think also in Denmark, you get some additional medical exams because of the diagnosis that otherwise you probably wouldn't be given.
Camille, du côté de
Camille, in France, what happened? Was there a difference before the diagnosis and after diagnosis? We know that children are being monitored and helped by speech therapists and physiotherapists. Now, you yourself are a speech therapist, and your husband, who's here somewhere, is a physiotherapist. Is that an advantage, or maybe not 100%? Well, honestly, I believe it was fortunate. I mean, we were alerted much earlier because we were able to spot the initial delay in learning to speak, becoming verbal, and we were able to trigger a certain kind of action earlier. But whether the child is diagnosed earlier or later, well, the fact that she was diagnosed at the age of 6.5 did not make that much difference because we already had started a number of therapies before she was formally diagnosed. But I remember the day the diagnosis was confirmed on December the 8th, 2017. I remember the day vividly. I went on the forum online to contact families whose children had DDX3X. We also contacted an association which the geneticists had given us the address for, and that helped. Because, by talking to other families, we felt like we could share our experiences and maybe share best practices, how to best deal with the problem. And we felt supported. We did not feel so isolated. Although, again, in our case, it did not change the therapies themselves. It helped us anticipate and look for a certain number of symptoms that you have to pay attention to. The DDX3X syndrome like all X-related syndromes, rare diseases, have different expression levels. And our daughters have the same kinds of symptoms, but they may be expressed at different levels. Nell, we can't, for Nell, we haven't seen any risk of anxiety, which is normally very present in many children, but anxiety may appear in different many ways and earlier or later. So the fact that we know that this is one of the symptoms that appear in the profile is something that helps us. Just a word on the strength of associations, of how much the associations can help parents once a diagnosis has been confirmed. What you do in the United States, can you say something about, the power of the association, how much it can help families cope with the disease?
So I think, and two, just to speak to your earlier question about the importance of early diagnosis, what we see the most in the US, and we have people from other countries, of course, that come to us when they're diagnosed, is that feeling of community and really having the opportunity to connect with other families. Even if it's in just a social setting, we use our Facebook group a lot where individuals, can go on and say, for example, my child's dealing with anxiety right now. What are other people using? What medications are working for you? Or what therapies are working? So I think that the early diagnosis piece is very important for that reason. Additionally, in terms of support that we are able to offer, our primary function is to connect families and then, of course, raise money to fund research to find therapies and treatments for DDX3X. Often, whenever a family comes to us and says, we've just been diagnosed, what do we do? The first thing we do is send them to the Facebook group where they can connect with other families and other caretakers and others that are dealing with the same things. We don't offer specifically recommendations for care, but we do offer an understanding or a sort of overview of what is available, and again, what other families have found that works well for them. I also want to mention that right now we're getting ready to launch a natural history study, which will help us not only in the US, but all over the world to understand the progression or the natural history of the disease. And understanding that will be very helpful to providing recommendations for treatments and therapies for families.
Voilà, mesdames, messieurs, je vous rappelle que vous pourrez poser des questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, you will be able to ask our guests, all four of them, questions, including Effie, who is online. Effie, don't worry, you will not be left outside. And the next question is for you, by the way. On the chat, Gwendoline is checking the questions, and during the panel discussion, we can deal with the more general questions this afternoon. So could you explain the major challenges you're facing on your daily life with your child? Has there been any evolution, Effie, with Sadie? You said anxiety was your major challenge?
Yes, so I know you will hear later on from Dr. Martin when she talks about the bingo study that my daughter, along with many others, were part of. One of the interesting things about finding out that Sadie has DDX3X was that I already knew lots of other people with similar conditions from other support groups, but I wanted to find out what was really specifically different about DDX3X from other conditions, and this is one of the things that the bingo study has managed to identify. I know that I think Camille said this isn't an issue for her daughter, so it is different for every child, but anxiety is a huge issue, and one that when the bingo study, we'll talk later on, that they found that was very different in DDX3X. It was a specific problem that other children, similar children with intellectual disability, did not show to the same extent. and Sadie's anxiety comes from sensitivities to sights, to sounds, and to situations that cause her to become overwhelmed. And it's finding out how to help her deal with those anxieties has been really, really important. In fact, we got an autism diagnosis quite early on from a clinical psychologist, even though they said they couldn't really do the normal diagnostic procedures with Sadie because of her intellectual disability. They gave us the diagnosis because in day-to-day life, it was the behaviors caused by that anxiety that were the most difficult to cope with. Now we have found lots of things that have helped, such as deep pressure therapies, big tight hugs, using weighted blankets, being able to avoid triggers, identify and avoid triggers that cause those anxieties have really helped. So there is hope out there for people who are finding that their children are exhibiting behaviours due to anxiety. It's a difficult thing to treat, but there are lots of things that can be done. So I think finding out more about anxiety, more about the causes of anxiety in our children, and finding out how to treat those is very, very useful for families.
Votre côté, Justine et Cornelia, ce sont des problèmes pour Justine de communication, pour Cornelia des problèmes de langage notamment.
So Justine and Cornelia, you have issues of communication. For Cornelia, problems of language. Can you tell us about the gestures? Yes, Maya, who is 9, is minimally verbal. I would say non-verbal, but I believe she must have about 15 words. Mommy, daddy, auntie, very limited vocabulary. So we were always told to try to sign, to make gestures, but not sign language. It's too complicated. Macathon does not exist in Spain, so we invented our own signs, which was recommended, and it works well. For example, this gesture is for the scooter, but for Maya is now 9 years old, and we would like to increase communication with other people apart from the family. So we now have a communication device with a tablet with some dynamic pictograms, and it seems to work. Her understanding has improved a lot. Until the age of 4, we weren't really sure of what she understood. So the pictograms were a bit too difficult at the time for her. But we started from the age of 5, and now we have the tablet, which started at the age of 6. But it's difficult for us as parents to change the signs from this sign for scooter to finding the right pictogram on the tablet. But thanks to a speech therapist and the professionals in her school, we really have seen progress. And for her, it's a great support when she is frustrated because she can't speak, because in this way she can communicate better with us. So in Denmark, you use a sign language which is specific to Denmark? Yes.
The French one, Méthode Sésame in Belgium. And this one is a little bit different. Some of the signs are the same, others are different, but it's the same principle. I think it's simplified sign language mainly for the use with people with disabilities. And this is a very strong point of the Danish system. Uda is in a wonderful inclusive kindergarten, and not only the specialized pedagogues who are employed there to work with the children with disabilities and the speech therapists, they know this sign to tell, but also most of the other therapists, the leadership of the kindergarten. And this is absolutely amazing. This was one of the factors that made us decide, okay, we're moving to Denmark, because their level of the inclusion they provide is just so good. And it's really a great kindergarten, and we are said that Uda will have to leave it next year at the age of 6 because it will be recommended that she go to a special school. And this leads me to her biggest difficulty. It is communication and speaking, because how can you know what is in someone's head if you can't get it out of them, if you can't understand it? Yeah, Uda has also, maybe she's would be classified as non-verbal, maybe minimally verbal. There are probably over 40 words, but most of them she can't pronounce properly. So my husband says, who does so much work with her at home, he says, yeah, for the last speech test, it's good that I was there because I speak Uda. The way that the speech therapist asked her the questions, it just didn't really work for Uda. And when Richard rephrased it in different ways, Uda managed it, and she knew what was requested of her. So yes, the intellectual disability is what I would say the greatest problem. Yes, I mean, sadly, she probably never be independent. It has to do with toilet training also. It's not yet toilet trained. Will it ever really work? We don't know. But yes, she will go to a special school. Yeah, if it has been. Do you want to come back to the schooling later, or shall I talk a little bit about this?
On va laisser peut-être parler Camille et puis ensuite parler effectivement évoquer les aides.
Well, we'll let Camille speak, and then we'll talk about the specific support you get in each country. Camille, I guess it's a difficult thing in daily life. The lack of initiative, you talk about a weakness in activities. What do you mean by that? Well, in our daily life, what is really most difficult to cope with and what is requiring most attention and energy is this lack of initiative. Nell is a very curious little girl, but she has trouble targeting her curiosity. She moves to different things, and it's we have to be present constantly. We have to have a dedicated ear, so to say, 24/7, to see how can we use the present situation to make it beneficial for her to learn something and to take pleasure in it, so that she actually acquires something. So we have to be constantly on the lookout for what she's doing and what she's going to do with the situation. Ladies, I'm going to ask you, as Cornelia was suggesting, can you pick specific support that you get in your country? First Cornelia, as she took the microphone, and then Effie.
Everyday life is possible like this, where we take most her therapies, 1 hour of speech therapy, 1 hour every 2 weeks of physiotherapy, and 1 hour every 2 weeks of ergotherapy takes place in the kindergarten. It's not only that, but they also teach the kindergarten pedagogues how to do the therapy, so it has a multiplicator effect. But of course, we'd love to see more face-to-face time with therapists also. So this doesn't take any particular effort from us, of course, at home to do the exercise again, but the fact that it's integrated in kindergarten makes life easier for us. But for the speech therapy, we take Uda twice a week downtown by bike, and this takes a lot of time, of course, and this wouldn't be possible for us without my husband, who has a lot of time to give to Uda. Makes possible that I still work part-time and even abroad in Belgium, where I used to work before, so our life is a little complicated to organize. You said a particular aid help that she has, which you'd like to know?
La façon dont vous êtes soutenu particulièrement qui pourrait inspirer le public.
Yes, the way in which you get a specific support and that could help others, something that exists in the country where you are and exists maybe elsewhere, and which is beneficial.
In Belgium, we would have had an inclusion also probably until the age of 6 in the preschool. My employer would have paid for a full-time assistant for her. And whereas in Denmark, they say this isn't really inclusion. If you need one full-time person to be all the time with your little girl, this is not really inclusion because she can't do anything autonomously with the other kids. Whereas down in the kindergarten, it is still possible. She's being helped to play with them, with the other kids. Many kids, they enjoy playing with her. They love to make her laugh because, like, when DDX3X girl, she's a very jolly character. She's easily amused. Yeah, I think the way they do inclusion in that kindergarten, with all the therapists knowing the sign language and using it, this helps Uya a lot to get her point across. Also, she does use a lot of the signs, not all of them perfectly, but well, if you know her, you will know what she means. And also the fact that we speak with her in all native languages, when stressed that also, because I think too many doctors still tell parents, oh, your child has an intellectual disability, better use only one language with her. That's a lot easier for her. But I've learned more and more, I've heard from you that it's okay to use your own language. I speak German with Uda. Richard speaks English in the kindergarten. She learns Danish, and she understands what we want from her.
Effie un exemple particulier?
Effie, can we have a specific example maybe or in the UK?
Yes, of course. Most of my daughter's therapies took place in her school. So different from other countries that I hear about, in the UK, most therapies, if the child is in special school, happen during school time in the school with medical professionals such as physiotherapists, speech therapists working in the school. But I would say that the one therapy that I did have to find separately for Sadie that made the biggest difference for her was music therapy, which you have to get funding for. It's not generally available through our health service, but I've applied for funding many times to get music therapy for my daughter because I think it really helps with her communication. It's playing on one of her main interests, which is music. Most of her week is currently made up with attending music groups and events, and where she finds spoken language difficult, the language of music is absolutely her language. I noticed you say before you speak Uda. Well, to speak Sadie, you have to sing. And if you sing to Sadie, her eyes will light up and she will just engage with you and go, you know my song, this is amazing. So, so music therapy has made the biggest difference for Sadie.
Voilà, l'école inclusive au Danemark, la musicothérapie.
Inclusive school in Denmark, music therapy in the UK. In France, Camille, in a few words, a specific thing, and then we'll ask Justine and then Chelsey. Okay, well, I believe we were lucky because very quickly we assumed what could help her. And when we saw that there was a lack of communication tools available, we trained immediately into Makaton and sign language. Is it due to the fact that I am a professional or that I am a mom? And very quickly, I introduced Makaton, which she used right away. Or in France, we are lucky to have a lot of treatment guidance, and we have the possibility of exchanging with specialists and families. There's no ideal journey between the school in a specific school or in a normal school or whatever. The important thing is to have enough sensitivity from the physicians, professionals, and family to know what is the best for the child. And the child is the one that responds or not. And Nell has a specific mantra. Yes, she says, do like everybody else, but in her way. And Justine in Spain, if we think of school, it's true that there's quite a strong inclusive educational policy in Catalonia where we live, but it didn't work um, for Maya because she was in a class of 25 children from the age of 6, and it was difficult for her to be surrounded with noisy children, and it was very difficult. So we moved her to specialized education, and we're lucky enough in Spain. You are certain to have a place for the child in the specific school, and she could be accepted in any school we chose. So we went from treatment after school to to as Effie was saying, everything in the school. So she has speech therapist, physiotherapist, everything within the school. We have taken on by adding treatment with dogs, animal assisted therapy, contact with dogs, and stimulation. And this has helped her a lot, I believe. And now we're starting horse therapy, equine therapy, because up till now she was a bit afraid of horses. So she managed to overcome this fear. And last week she rode a horse. She got onto a horse, and we're going to see if this adds any benefit for her. And in Spain, this is very common. There are 50 cases in Spain now, and out of the families, I believe that half of them goes through horse riding therapy or equine therapy. You can, and this is beneficial. So therapy with horses and dogs very quickly in the US, specific practice that could inspire Europe or France.
I don't know that we have a specific practice that could inspire you. In the U.S., it varies greatly based on what state an individual lives in. But I will echo the equine therapy. I think we have a lot of families that use hippotherapy. Also in the UK, music therapy. Our children also, whenever families first join the community, we hear over and over again that their kids love music, water, and animals. So basically anything that falls into those 3 categories is very helpful.
La musique, les animaux et l'eau. Dans quelques instants, la
So
parole
music, animals and water. So now, ladies and gentlemen, you have the floor. If you have questions for our 5 guests, we have learned in the meantime that there are quite a lot of questions for the guests and our specialists. Okay, so we'll continue for about 10 minutes. But before that, ladies, in one sentence, what is your ultimate dream if you had a magic wand? Sorry for this expression. Camille and then Effie. Well, we should continue to be close to the needs of our children, to adapt as much as possible, because we ask them to adapt to society, but society has to adapt to them. And thanks to that, we'll be able to continue seeing them grow up. Okay, being close to the needs. Effie?
Hi, yes, my dream for the future is that the researchers and doctors become fully aware of the causes and effects of the DDX3X mutations across the world, and that they share and use that knowledge to improve the lives of families affected like mine and families in the future who may be affected.
Justine, pour vous, c'est
Justine, for you, what is your dream pre-birth test? Yes, well, I would like to thank all the researchers for their work and please continue this work so we know more and we can help our children and also maybe improve their future life and hope that they can grow up in a society that is more inclusive and not everything is linked to the medical field. And what about the prenatal test? I don't know. It depends on the countries. In Spain, DDX3X is not included in the tests that are not before in the prenatal tests. In the short term, that would be a dream, really, if we could detect DDX3X in utero.
Cornelia.
Cornelia?
I have been told that the special school where Uda will go to is a very good one. I'm sure she'll be well taken care of. She'll learn a lot of things and enjoy herself. My dream would also be, like many of yours, a more inclusive society where maybe special schools wouldn't be needed because all the professionals to help would be there to help the kids in a standard school. And therefore, and now I have also a request mainly for politicians that carers and health professionals would be better paid because that's what we're all worried about. If we think our kids would probably need help all their lives, just like elderly people. We don't have enough carers in any country in Europe, and all this needs to be provided.
C'est un sujet évidemment qu'on a en France.
This is obviously a major topic in France. Oh, Chelsey, I didn't give you the floor. Go ahead for the final word.
No, that's okay. Really quickly to your point, Justine, I do know of 2 cases that have been diagnosed in utero. Both are in the UK, I believe. And then, of course, I think the same as everyone that a more inclusive society and better treatments and therapies for patients.
Très bien. Merci beaucoup, mesdames. Vous restez
Well, thank you very much, ladies. I think we can give them a round of applause. Cornelia Klugman, Camille Stoven, Justine Desouches, and Chelsey McCarthy, as well as Effie Fenton in the UK. There have been questions to the doctors that were answered directly thanks to Gwendoline, so we're not going to share here. Just maybe questions to the 5 guests in the 10 minutes that remain before lunch. Hello? Yes, really, what you say is very important to us. Our daughter was diagnosed last month, and we are thinking of a 3rd child, and we are wondering what this diagnosis is going to change for our daughter, and what about the 3rd child? Several of you had children afterwards. How did your pregnancy go? What tests were made in order to eliminate the risk of having another child with the syndrome? Well, she was the eldest of our daughter, and the agenda worked well because Nell's diagnosis arrived after I was 1 month after I was pregnant for the 4th one. So we at the time thought it was a teratogenic factor, maybe. So if we'd had the diagnosis before, would we have taken the risk? But according to the medical world, they say we have no more risk with a 2nd or 3rd pregnancy. But would we have changed our way if we'd had it before? I don't know. Justine, well, in Spain, we had the diagnosis before, and this is why we had other children afterwards. And in fact, they carry out a test. I believe it's at 10 weeks of pregnancy. to see if the child has the mutation. This is what is done in Spain. Any more questions? Do we have questions online for our 5 guests? No? So everything takes place here in the auditorium. Well, my daughter was diagnosed a year ago. Take your time to reformulate your question. Don't worry. You can take the floor afterwards. The person was getting emotional, couldn't ask the question. Sir, do you think that your children are aware of their disability? Do they express this awareness? Well, this is what we were talking about last night, in fact. We had to use the word handicap or disability on the day she was diagnosed. And then we had to use the word to get a kind of vaccinated. And Nell and her 3 sisters are aware of the fact that she's not disabled, but she has a disability. And we don't want to paint the devil on the world. On the wall. We just say, well, this is what it is. And this is the decision we made to put words on situations and on things, and we feel everybody feels better with that. And Nell is aware of the fact that she doesn't function like the others, and she expresses it. Well, we're lucky that she is really verbal. So she says that she has a DDX3X syndrome, that she has a disability. What is her degree of awareness? No one can tell, but I don't know if she realizes that there are things she'll never do, but she continues saying, I want to do like everybody else, but in my own way. So she's aware of the fact that she has a disability. When she comes back from school with some homework, she says, I have homework to do.
Thank you. I was interested in the attentional challenges of the children, and I suppose thinking about that impact on therapy and whether or not any families have shared perhaps trying Ritalin or different types of medications for the attention, and whether that's had an impact on learning, speech learning or other learning for children.
In our case, we just started medication for attention disorders, Ritalin, but in Spain it has another name. So we've just been using it for 2 weeks. I can't tell you if it has an impact or not, but it's very frightening, I must say. For parents, some medication is very frightening, always. It took time, but in Spain, they never started treatment before the age of 6, 7, or even 8. So we just started. Maya is 9, but I can't tell you about the benefits. I know that other families started treatments before Maya, and it seems to work. But sometimes it's difficult to have the right medication and then the right dosage. This is very complicated. But for those for whom it works, there are real benefits on learning. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's almost 12:30. You will have understood that this kind of event, the interest of this kind of event is to exchange. So we'll have an hour to exchange. But before that, we have one last question online. Please stay connected with our friends. For our friends who are online, we will start at 1:45 sharp Paris time. Stay connected. But before that, before we stop, there's one last question on the chat. Gwendoline, can you tell us? A question for Chelsey. Someone is asking, out of the 1,100 people, how many are over 30 years of age, and have there been clinical studies for that cohort?
Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that question. So right now our count is 1,180 patients. Anytime I fill out a form that wants me to answer the question of how old people are, I usually say that we have maybe 15 to 20% who would be over the age of 30, or I'm sorry, over the age of 20. I think the oldest case that we know of is 50-plus-year-old woman in Israel. We know of a couple of other 50-plus-year-olds in, I think, the UK and the US as well. In terms of clinical studies right now, there are not clinical studies being conducted in any way for DDX3X. However, we would absolutely hope to have participation in our natural history study from individuals of all ages. So I'm sorry that I don't have a better answer for you, or a more direct answer.
Ok, voilà, c'était la dernière question. On se retrouve donc ici à 13h35-40 pour un démarrage à 13h45 précise et donc respecté.
So back here at 1:35, 1:40 to start at 1:45